here's the element that we're focusing on. It kind of explains, gives a little lesson on the element, and then I show how I would revise. Because the idea really is good writing is rewriting. Like the first draft is important, the second draft is important, they're all important, but you're gonna get the gold once you really dig in and learn how to look at what you've written and make it better.
Some experts chase attention, but the smart ones build authority. You're listening to the Authority on Demand podcast, where credibility becomes your competitive advantage. Every week, we're pulling back the curtain on how founders and leaders turn expertise into inbound demand through books that position, media that converse, and strategies that actually move the needle. I'm Danielle Hutchinson, your host and Chief Creative Officer at Authority on Demand. Now, let's turn your authority into leverage.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Authors on Mission podcast. Here's a question that keeps many writers up at night. When is my manuscript actually ready for an editor? And once I find one, what on earth should I expect? If you've ever stayed at your draft wondering whether you need a developmental edit, a copy edit, or if you can just throw the whole thing in the trash and start over, this episode is for you. Our guest is Katie Chambers, the editor who's become known as the admin queen in the publishing world. She's the founder of Beacon Point Editing Services, a former English teacher who built a thriving editorial agency from scratch, and someone who's handled hundreds of authors through the often intimidating editing process. So whether you're a first-time author who's never worked with an editor, or you've been through the process and want some more insights, Katie's going to share some tips on both sides of the red pen. Katie, welcome to the Authors on Mission podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Of course, it's an honor to have you. I think that obviously anybody listening to this podcast who's interested in writing a book or has already written one can learn a ton of insights from you because, well, it's what you're good at. It's what you do for a living. So I think we're gonna all pick up on some great editing tips today.
That's the hope.
Awesome. So yeah, I'm wondering if you'd like to give us a little bit more information. You and I have something in common. We both were teachers and kind of transitioned into the writing world. So I guess you could share a little insight on how that happened. What exactly sparked your transition?
So I thought I'd always be a teacher. Teaching is what I am at my core. And I thought, oh, it's perfect with kids because they're at school at the same time. Then you come home and I had this ideal picture painted in my head. And as you know, that is not how it works. I was very dedicated to my job, and it was like a 24/7 job. I was grading, especially as an English teacher who was really trying to help people learn how to write really well. I was giving explicit feedback on every single step of the writing process. I graded every step. Like I graded their rough draft. I graded well, I didn't grade the rough draft. I gave feedback in the rough draft, but I graded how well they edited, like everything. And so every essay was graded like 5 times. So I was constantly working, and I'm like, there's no way I can be a mom and a teacher. Like I would have no energy for my own kids. I would have no time for my own kids. And I didn't want that. But I was like, well, I could still do it and just teach a different way. But I'm like, I don't know how to teach. This is the way that I find effective and that I really feel like I'm making an impact and helping kids learn how to write. So I was like, I just need to not teach well, and maybe I'll get back to teaching after my kids are older. But you know what? I was like itching for something to do. I love working. I have to work. I have to contribute to society. So even though I liked being a mom, I couldn't just be a mom. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but it just didn't fit for me. So I was like, I gotta find something. So I started off tutoring, and then I was like, you know what? I want to like help authors write. That's what I liked about English teaching. So maybe I could train to be an editor, and maybe I'll see if I like it. And oh my gosh, I love it. I love it. I miss the teaching side a lot, which is why I kind of combine them, and I do a lot of teaching things, but I have really enjoyed being an editor.
That's great. Yeah, I know what it's like to realize, you know what, I need to shift, I need to transition out of what I'm doing. Even though you thought that teaching was going to last forever, there's always these limitations and conflicts that come, so I totally understand there. And it's great to be able to find something that was a perfect balance of what you do love doing.
Mhm.
But that being said, when I was looking through materials, I saw that you kind of admitted to having a love-hate relationship with writing. So I'm wondering if you could shine a little light on that one. I saw that you say you call yourself your own toughest critic, but how do you help authors overcome their own inner critics?
So the nice thing, the reason why I have kind of this love-hate relationship with writing is I wish I were a better writer. I am great at editing. You create. I come in and help make it better. But creating, the creating process, I'm like, oh my goodness, I am surrounded since I was studying to be an English teacher. I was surrounded by really good writers in all of my classes because they were all, some of them were just English classes, so they weren't necessarily studying to be teachers, but they were English people. And so they would write these beautiful essays. And I'm like, I just like nothing in comparison to theirs. I mean, obviously I'm better than your average writer, but I was like with writers all the time. And now I'm surrounded by authors who are just so creative in their writing. And I'm like, I don't think I could create this from scratch. And that frustrates me because I wish I could. But there's different roles, right? Like we all have our different talents. And I'm like, you know, I sit there and I'm like, I'm taking an author and I look at their writing and I can elevate it. And I can elevate my own writing. But if I'm starting here and the author's starting here, obviously my work is going to help them more than it's going to help my own work. You know what I mean? So
Right.
I think I've just surrounded by so many great writers that it makes me more critical of my own writing. But yeah.
Understood. Well, I definitely get that, right? Some people are experts at editing, others enjoy the writing process more. And I'm sure that you are a great writer, but we all have that inner critic, like I mentioned. So I get it. You need to overcome those things, and it's good that you found your niche and you've been able to help others through these different practices. So, kind of, moving forward a little bit with your story, you ended up making your own editing company and you have a team of 12 editors now. So, I'm wondering if you can share some insights about what it's like to kind of oversee other editors. I'm sure that's a little bit of a different take on what you're used to doing, being that you used to teach students as opposed to
Yes.
employees, right?
Yes. Well, I was turning away so many inquiries because I was full.
Mm,
And I was like, well, I'm turning this away, but I know I could help them. Like, I know, like, I'd read, I'm like, I think my style of editing would be a good fit for them. My style of editing is not a good fit for everybody, but I would get some inquiries where I was like, oh, I really think I could help you, but dang it, I'm full. So, I started just June of last year. I became an agency and brought some editors on board. And basically, what I was looking for was people who had a similar editing style. So there were a lot of great editors that I didn't bring onto my team because their style was different, and that's fine. But I wanted it to be this is the Beacons Point style. This is my brand, right? So I brought in some editors that had a similar style to me, and then what I do is when they do the editing, I also come in and kind of make some more changes and show them. So I'm kind of teaching them more on they're great editors. I don't really have to teach them, but it's just training them on my style a little bit more so that we have that uniformity. But they already were brought onto my team because they had a similar enough style that I felt we could work well together. I think a lot of it is actually what I've mostly helped them with is the behind the scenes part. Some of the things they didn't know were part of the job that I already take care of for them since I'm the frontliner and the face of the business and I do all the admin stuff. But that's helping them in their own businesses because they have their own editing business. They just also do work for me. So that's mostly what I've been helping with. And it's been fun to teach them, the admin side, but they came on as solid editors and editing ability to start off with.
Understood. Yeah, I appreciate you walking us through that a little bit because I think that everybody does have a little bit of an inner editor inside them. So it's good that you're able to kind of bring that out of others and compare styles and guide them to meet the expectations of your company. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, been fun.
Yeah, yeah. So I actually, you did mention that you're working on two self-editing booklets for authors. I'm wondering if you'd like to share a little bit about those.
Yes, so I have to show one of my favorite craft books is called Self-Editing for Fiction Writers. I learned so much when I read that book. And most writers will say, like, good writing is rewriting. Like, rewriting is where it happens. That's where the magic happens and all. And I actually just finished editing a series of books he was a fiction author, but he just wrote a series of nonfiction books on how to critique well. Because
Mm,
he also bought into this idea of like, if you know how to critique others well, it's going to make you a better writer. And so he talked about how to find a writing community. And then his first book was about how to find a critique group. And then each book was about how to critique for a certain element. Because the idea really is good writing is rewriting. Like the first draft is important, the second draft is important, they're all important, but you're gonna get the gold once you really dig in and learn how to look at what you've written and make it better. And if you know how to critique others and make it better. So while I love this self-editing guide for fiction writers, I haven't seen one for nonfiction. And there were some things in that book that I didn't feel like it covered everything, and it's not going to cover everything, but it was really great book. But I just saw, there's a lot of blogs out there about how to self-edit. But again, a blog is not going to deep dive into every single concept. It's going to take maybe 5 or 7 things that are most bang for your buck. How to edit for these 5 things, or how to edit for these 6 things. So my idea is I'm taking all these kind of blogs that I've also written and curating them, but then also adding to them so that each of my guides has here's the element that we're focusing on. It kind of explains, gives a little lesson on the element, and then I show how I would revise. So I show a poorly, not a poorly written one, but like a something that is weak in that element. If that element's organization, or if that element is sentence variety, then I make sure the passage is weak in that, and then I revise, showing how I'd revise it. And then then they have their own practice, and then they have a little checklist of things to do with their own manuscript for that. So the idea is so that they don't have to go, because they could find all this stuff. But it's like everywhere. It's like, oh, find this blog post that mentions these 5 tips. Now find this one that mentions these 7 tips. Now, the only one I saw all put together was that book, but that was just fiction writers, and it didn't have, there were some things I thought I could add to it. So I have a guide for nonfiction writers and a guide for fiction writers to help them through.
Understood. Those are tips that can work for any manuscript, though. I like that you also have the practice guides in there so people can actively engage with what you've put down and apply it to their actual manuscripts. That's great. Just to clarify, are you still working on these, or are they out for everyone to
I'm working on them. I'm
You're
building
working on
them.
them? Okay, just to be sure. So in that case, we can definitely public follow your website and social medias to stay up to date for when they be released.
Yes, so I also have a resource for writers page on my
Okay.
website. And again, this comes back to the fact that I am a teacher at heart. And my resources for writers page has resources that are paid and free. Like I have all my blogs on there. I've got other free resources. There's ones that cost money, ones that are free, and they're not just from me. Because I'm not just about like, oh, here's what I offer. I'm about like I want to help you learn. And it's daunting. The even as an editor, I'm like, okay, I know about my part of the process. I don't know about all the other parts, all the other stages. And I wanted to know so that I could teach my authors, so that I could kind of be that guide, because it's overwhelming to just go and find everything themselves. So I have kind of talked to industry professionals that do the various stages, and I have now kind of learned about those stages. So anybody who actually hires me, I actually provide a next steps packet that explains every single stage that comes after me, as well as service providers, recommended service providers for those stages. But my resources for writers center has the stages that come before editing, and then some that come after. And it's a curated center of like resources that other editors have put out, other authors have put out, that I've put out, that I just think is going to help them, because there's just so much out there. Sure, they can find things out there, but it's a lot of time to go searching everything. So I just wanted a center where it was like, okay, land here and kind of work your way through the freedom pay resources, so you kind of feel like you're more confident going forward in all these various steps that it involves. It's a journey, right? Publishing a book is huge. I mean, there's so much that goes into it. So, yeah.
Right. No, hey, that's great that you really just offer a comprehensive, guide in whatever stage that someone seems to be in for that manuscript. It's great that you have just a wealth of resources there. So that's perfect. And we'll put the links to those in the description box of this podcast today, so everyone can go ahead and click on over to it and learn a little bit more.
Yes, and when my self-editing guides are ready, they will be on that resource for writers page.
Perfect. So everyone could keep an eye out for those and be on the lookout.
Yes.
So all this being said, you offered some really amazing editing tips so far, but I'm wondering if there's a certain one that writers get wrong more common? Like, what's like the most common mistake that you have to adjust in a manuscript, would you say? Is there one that happens more so than
Yeah.
others?
Yeah. So I'll talk about fiction, then I'll talk about nonfiction.
Great.
With fiction, if we're going to look at the grammar side, it's a simple one. It's a simple one that would reduce your cost. But so many seem to kind of mix up when to use a comma and when to use a period before your dialogue. So versus like if you have a tag like she said and then comma versus you have an action beat, she laughed, period, and then what she said because laughed isn't it's not a verb of utterance. Verbs of utterances are they're not like an action that they did. Or she sat on the couch and then they say what they said. Sometimes they'll even have a comma there because I think that there's always should be a comma before their dialogue and really know if it's an action beat, if it's an action they took, she sat on the couch, she laughed, it's a period before the dialogue. It's a very simple concept that an author can eventually kind of work on. I've had authors have to like curb that habit because they have a habit of always putting a comma in. It's just like so when they're doing their self-editing, there's like, oh, I have to always go through and check for that because I know when I'm writing, I just always put a comma in because habits die hard. That one's the simplistic on the kind of grammar side. On kind of more of the craft of writing side, um, the biggest thing that I think kills a lot of authors' stories is info dumping. This is where an author kind of just feeds the reader information and nothing's actually really happening. We're just sitting there learning about the world, or we're sitting there learning about the character's background, or, it's like we're almost being lectured to, even though they write it creatively and it doesn't read like a lecture, it's still, we're wanting, the readers are wanting to get on with the story, but it's information they need to know some of the time. Some of the times it's not. Some of the times I'm like, oh, you can just cut it out. Other times it's information they need to know, but you can weave it into action. You can weave it into the plot.
Or dialogue too?
Yeah, and into dialogue too. You just have to be careful because sometimes when they try to fix info dumping by weaving it into dialogue, they then get, as you know, Bob dialogue, which is unrealistic. It's two characters talking about something that they both know and understand already. So they're just trying to tell the reader. And then it's like they wouldn't really be sitting here having this conversation about how the rules of their world work because they already know. So it does work. It does work. You can weave it into dialogue if it's natural dialogue that they would be having. Um, but yeah, I have a whole blog on my Resource Writer Center. I have a lot of information on info dumping, how to find it, how to fix it, because it just halts a story. Now, this doesn't mean never tell. Absolutely not. Like you can't show all the time. You have it's not show, don't tell. It's show and tell. Know when to show, know when to tell. But info dumping is just it's long. It's too length of telling without getting into anything going on. So you can have like short little info dumps, like then that's fine. But when it's like this long, like they want to get onto the story. So I'd say that's the biggest craft one that I help authors with, and then the comma versus period with dialogue is the grammar one. When it comes to nonfiction, probably the biggest grammar kind of punctuation I'm changing a lot is commas. Sorry, my cat just like
Oh, it's okay. I was just watching the kitty cat go by.
no, my is when is using commas after introductions. You don't if they're short adverbial ones, you don't need them. You do need them if they're kind of longer and unwieldy, and it helps. This one, the reason why this is kind of something I focus on a lot is because it's kind of a trend now to leave that out more often, as opposed to like after every sentence introduction, I need a comma, which is how it used to be. But things have swung too far the other way, and sometimes they're leaving them out when I'm like, this is kind of long before we get to the main clause. A comma is really going to help us here. So it's kind of deciding that. And then commas with coordinating conjunctions, joining two sentences together. So like, when you have a sentence, something that could be a sentence by itself, and then you have like for, and, nor, but, or, yet, so, and then a sentence having a comma before that. So that's the thing I probably help nonfiction authors with the most in terms of grammar. In terms of craft, what I'm helping them with a lot is organizational structure, because a lot of times they have these ideas and they're getting out the ideas on the page, but they're not showing how the ideas connect. So they'll like talk about this topic and then they'll move on to another topic, and the topics are related. It's not that it's off topic for that chapter. Like it can belong in that chapter just fine, but it's a subtle switch into topic and the reader just kind of goes no, for a second, as opposed to adding in a transition, an effective transition, not just like first, next, second, also, but a transition that shows how these ideas connect. So everything is kind of flowing together, if that makes sense. So that's probably the number one thing I help nonfiction authors with, or I'm adding in transitions all the time. And when I add in the transition, of course, if they don't like the wording I used, but they agree that that transition is needed, they can, reject my version and write their own. It's just, I write a suggested one for them to kind of show, because it's a hard concept. If I don't kind of show them, here's how you can smoothly transition from one idea to the next idea. And I also have a whole blog post on writing effective transitions, because we don't. But let's get away from the first, next also, and let's kind of show how our ideas connect. So we're following your line of thinking.
Understood. Well, I really appreciate you walking us through all of that. I could definitely relate to both the fiction and nonfiction sides of those as somebody who also edits both types of work as well. And I think that, info dumping is such a huge thing, just going back to that, because yeah, I mean, I've been editing a lot of manuscripts. Many of them come through with just 2 pages worth of world setup. No
Yeah.
one's going to read that. You need to weave it in. So these are all very actionable and wonderful insights that you've shared. Um, so kind of moving forward then, we've chatted a bunch about the services you offer and some tips. I'm curious to know, have you ever considered writing your own book, aside from the help books? Anything, about your journey or
You
building
know,
a business maybe? I'm just out of curiosity.
no, I've had some people tell me I should.
Yeah,
Um, I just don't. Comes back to that love hate. I've written a few booklets actually. So I mean, I guess you can say I've got a book published with the Editorial Freelancers Association that helps editors with tracking their business metrics and teaching them how to do that. But obviously, it's a booklet size and a book size.
right.
Um, I could see myself writing a book, but it would be nonfiction for sure. I can write scenes. I can write a beautiful scene. But to craft an entire plot from beginning to end with a full character arc, I wish I could do that. I am just amazed at the creativity. But like I said, it's the creativity part that I'm like, I'm not that creative, but I can come in and see where your plot holes are and where your characters needs to be strengthened and where you've got info dumping, where you've got head hopping, and I can elevate it. But to actually create, oh, I wish I could. That would be beautiful. But if I ever were to write a book, it'd be nonfiction. Maybe I could write a short story, because I have gone in and modeled some craft writing for my authors. I've taken kind of a scene that they've written that's been too much telling, and I've modeled for them. I've rewritten the scene entirely as a model. Obviously, they can then make it their own, but just to kind of show what it would look like to have more character interiority, or to show instead of tell. And I've got some beautiful writing in there. Like I look at it, I'm like, I like that sentence. It was fire. But a whole book? No, they already did the creation. I'm just kind of making that scene a little prettier. But yeah.
Understood, understood. Well, hey, I mean, it's for some people, it's for other, not for others. I think that what you do is wonderful, and you're an expert in, what you do help others with editing, so that's perfect. So that being said, though, you've worked with hundreds of authors. Have there been any particularly memorable moments where you've seen an author break through their own barriers, or just a touching story that you've been able to assist a certain client with? I'm curious if any stand out above others.
Yeah, so I had this one client who was resistant to the editing process. In that he liked my edits, he liked my revision. He didn't like to do the actual changes himself. And that's kind of what my style is actually. Beacon Point style, which is not for everyone, is hands-on, where we actually make the changes. But then, of course, you can reject and write your own. But instead of just suggesting that you make it, well, we suggest you make some of them, ones we can't do, but we'll model it directly in the text and say this is kind of an idea. But even that, he was like, oh, it's so cumbersome to go through. And he wanted to outsource it, right? He was like, oh, somebody else revise my book. And I told him, like, you're going to grow the most as a writer by going through this process. And it's going to make your next book better and your next book better having done this. And he tried to outsource it and we put it off. And then eventually he was like, you know what? I do like what you've done. It was my editorial letter. I'd written an editorial letter of things to suggest. And he's like, I agree with your suggestions. It's just, I don't want to go back in and make them. Like, I've read this book too many times. He just didn't want to do the work, essentially, what it boiled down to. But eventually he kind of realized that was the best path forward and he did it. And oh, his revisions were fire. Like the way he had taken my suggestions and made them better. He saw what I had pointed out were some issues, and I gave him solutions, some solutions, and he took my solutions for some of them. Some of them he did his own solution, and some he took mine but then made my solutions better. And it was just wonderful to see. And then his subsequent books, I had far less um, feedback because he had taken that time to really learn how to improve his own writing. And then he did that, from the get-go with the further books. So that was fun to see that like he was so resistant to it, but then he realized the benefit in it.
Yeah, I've definitely had a lot of clients like that too, ones that don't want you to change the manuscript too much, but still want your help or, disagree with your suggestions even. And then at that point, you just have to be like, you know what? It's your book at the end of the day, but this is
Yeah.
something that I've seen successful in other pieces. So,
Yeah, it's their book at the end of the day. There's a few I will sometimes push back on. I only push back if I feel like this is actually really going to hurt your sales or hurt your readership, and I want to tell you why. But if you don't agree with me, totally fine. But like I said, I've only probably pushed back on maybe four or five because they come back to me like, this looks dumb. And I'm like, well, that's correct grammar. And I promise you, people are going to nail you to the wall if you don't follow this specific thing. Not that you have to always have correct grammar, but it was one specific thing that the author thought looked dumb because he wasn't used to it. And I'm like, well, that's actually really how it's supposed to be done. And you're gonna might have a lot of readers that are like, oh, he didn't edit at all, or this, because they like to pick on grammar errors or whatever. And I'm like, you're gonna have it all over, and then it's gonna look bad. And then so he eventually came around too. That was a different author, but it's their book at the end of the day. And if you don't agree with my suggestions, that's totally fine. The only time I'll push back is if I'm like, I think this will hurt you. But I only push back once, and if they still don't agree, move on. Yeah.
Understood. Yeah, I mean, that's all you can do.
Yeah.
Also, I'd like to point out, I always see this myself where, a client might come to me saying, I've already had this manuscript edited, and then they'll show me their editor's feedback, and I look at them like, so this person just kind of gave you some notes and just has some ideas for edits, but they're not actually implementing the changes. It's something I was curious about because my definition of editing has always been going in and making the changes. So I would assume that if you're not doing anything to the actual text, it's more beta reading. I don't know,
Yeah.
that's kind of my opinion. I'm like, how can that be editing?
Well, editors, I mean, there's different styles out there, and
Different
there's
styles, yeah.
authors have different preferences. So I have, I know some developmental editors, they'll have they'll have their service where they don't touch the text at all and they just write a letter and they call that like a manuscript evaluation, which is
Right.
cheaper than a full developmental edit. Then they'll have a developmental edit where they'll make suggestions in the margins of the text, but they actually don't touch the text still. They just make their suggestions down the margin as well as having the editorial letter. So the editorial letter will just be an overview of, kind of like notes, like beta reading, but a more advanced beta reading with their manuscript evaluation. But their developmental edits are more specific because they'll point out issues in the specific moment that it's occurring and offer a suggestion to fix it then, but they still don't make the change in the text. They let the author do that. And I know that some authors prefer that because they see their words, their precious words being touched. They're like, no. And I'm like, you know what? Instead of making the suggestion on the margin, I think it's easier for my brain to see it in context of the actual manuscript. So I'm going to just make that change. And then I'm going to explain why I made the change in that comment rather than explain why a change is needed and offer the suggestion in the comment. I make it to the actual text. But I make it very clear to them that those are still just suggestions. It's done with track changes. You can accept it, you can reject it, you can accept it and then tweak it and make it your own. I'm not saying, this is what you must do. It's the same as offering a suggestion in the comment. It's the same principle in that it's a suggestion. I just do it to the actual text because I think it's easier to see it in context. But I know for some authors, they're like, why did you touch so much of my words? And I'm like, it's just an idea. You can do it your own way. But so, I mean, different styles. My style is certainly not for everybody. I'm sure some would look at it and go, why'd you touch so much? I'd prefer you to just make the suggestion and then I make the change. And that's fine.
Right. Yeah, I guess that's another point to make clear to any editors listening is to lay out the expectations of scope of work prior to anything. Going over everything in detail, being very explicit. From my experience working with clients, you need to make sure you're on the same page because then you're just gonna have problems down the line if not. So always good
Right.
to distinguish.
Right.
So all of this being said, as we begin to wrap up today, Katie, I'm wondering if you have any other last bits of advice or words of wisdom for the audience who are listening today.
Words of wisdom. Sorry, the Beatles song just popped in my head and now I got the lyrics running. Uh, if you're going to write a book, and I know how expensive it is, it's expensive, it's overwhelming because, you've got editing, you've got cover design, you've got all these expenses, and the ROI may or may not end up being there. But you have to decide what your purpose is for writing it and align yourself with that purpose. If you want to reach readers and impact readers, the best way to do that is have professionals help you because you are never going to be able to look at your book from a reader perspective. You wrote it. You don't see what a reader's seeing. Um, so you need at least one professional to just help you along the way. And I realize if you can't afford everything, you can't afford everything, and I can appreciate that. But having one professional kind of look at it from a reader's perspective, whether they're just being a beta reader, and then when you get their feedback, you're sit on it, okay? Don't let your instant reaction be the end all be all because it's a knee-jerk reaction. We all have knee-jerk reactions to our creative work, like you didn't like that part. But then, just let it sit. Just let it sit for a minute and then come back. And if you still don't agree with it, awesome. Don't take it. You are the author. But don't rely on your knee-jerk reaction and work with at least one professional to look over your book, whether it's a beta reader, just giving you some overarching critiques, or whether it's an actual edit. And same with the cover, and one professional. And then your cover and your editing, I think, are the two things that are just going to really help you reach the audience you want to reach. Unless your goal is to just be published and not necessarily reach a whole lot of readers, then
Right.
maybe that's your goal. You don't want to spend the money on it, but yeah.
Yeah, I guess you need to evaluate your goals before even moving forward to reaching out. But regardless, as you said, you do need to have a second pair of eyes on it, and definitely a professional, somebody who can make it better than it already is and just offer more insights in one way or another. It's always just very valuable, especially if they see such an influx of new books coming out. You need to make yours stand out. You don't want yours to be just, crushed by the wave of other books. So that's
Right.
exactly what, editing services do. So all this being said, it's been a wonderful episode with you, Katie. I've enjoyed hearing out your insights and your experiences and your career. So thank you so much for sharing with us. And
Thank you.
everybody listening, you can go ahead and check out all of Katie's resources on the links in the description box today. Katie, thank you for joining us. It's really been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you.
Of course, of course. And remember, everybody, remember working with an editor isn't about having someone fix your broken writing. It's about partnering with somebody who can help you make your good writing great and make your great writing unforgettable. Don't let fear of the process keep you from taking that next step toward your publishing goals. Be sure to check out Shining Beacon and everything else that Katie Chambers has talked with us about today. In the meantime, keep writing, keep pushing forward, and remember that every successful author has help along the way. Until next time, this is the Authors on Mission podcast.
That's a wrap on another episode of the Authority on Demand podcast. If today's conversation sparked something in you, don't keep it to yourself. Share this episode with a founder or a leader who's ready to stop being the best kept secret in their industry. If you want to turn your expertise into inbound demand, head to authorityondemand.com to see how we help clients go from unknown to in demand. I'm Danielle Hutchinson, and I'll catch you on the next one. Now, go build some authority.